Good evening, everybody, and welcome to College Football Wraparound. I'm Cooper Naylor. So glad that you could join me as what a great night. We're going to be talking about the college football playoff rankings that just was unveiled yesterday. I'm going to go through my poll. I have the same top four as the CFP rankings, and that's how I'm going to do it because at this point, the CFP that's the official rankings. My top four will be the same top four as what you got from the CFP. Although 5 on to 25, I'm going to have a different 5 through 25. That's where I can disagree a little bit because, you can't argue with the top four that the CFP has put. They've got the four best teams. That's how we're going to do it here with my rankings. Then we're going to get into Oklahoma, Kansas. We're going to get into Clemson, NC State, Oregon, Utah, Ohio State, Wisconsin. We're going to have a Q&A in the middle of the show. And then also, we're going to announce our Week 10 game. So you want to stay tuned. We got a lot to cover tonight. And so just buckle up as we're going to have a good one. Sorry, real quickly. There we go. All right, so let's go ahead and look at the CFP rankings. And so here is what the CFP rankings are looking like. Your top four: Ohio State, Georgia, Michigan, Florida State. And then you got 5 through 25. So you got Washington, Oregon, Texas, Alabama, Oklahoma, Ole Miss, Penn State, Missouri, Louisville, LSU, Notre Dame, Oregon State, Tennessee, Utah, UCLA, USC, Kansas, Oklahoma State, Kansas State, Tulane, and Air Force. So, number one, Ohio State. I think honestly, and this is where I agree with them with Ohio State being number one, it's the body of work they have. Because, you look at their wins. Excuse me. Their wins so far. You've got to win on the road at Notre Dame. You can't take that lightly because it was two undefeated teams. You've got, I believe, 4-0 Notre Dame against 3-0 Ohio State in that game. So you can't take that away from Ohio State. That's a pretty good win going on the road to Notre Dame and having that win. Good win. At home against Penn State, both teams undefeated again. So far, I think the body of work of what Ohio State has, plus if you look at if you do the eye test with them, the offense is kind of pedestrian. It's okay. It's not incredible. But I think what gets them the number one ranking, when you look at the eye test point of view, the defense. I think the defense has helped them look really good this season. I wouldn't say they're one of the best defenses in college football. They're pretty good. But Ohio State, number one team for sure. I think that's what they were looking at. So that ultimately is why I think Ohio State got number one. Then you look at Georgia. I think when you look at Georgia, the reason why they're number two is I think really the big thing that's separating Ohio State and Georgia right now is the win, like the body of work so far as who have you beat. I feel like that's kind of hindered Georgia a little bit because one, I don't think the competition Georgia's played this season has been to the degree of what Ohio State has had to play so far. So ultimately, I think it's that really separates Ohio State and Georgia right now. But easily once Georgia, I think, once they play some good teams, which I would think, because you've got Tennessee at 17. When you play Tennessee, this week against Missouri is going to weigh heavily with how Georgia's viewed. I think that's the only two games remaining that Georgia is really, they've got to win these to really build up their strength of schedule. Because if you look at Georgia, they don't really have that incredible strength of schedule of what Ohio State does. So to be able to possibly get number one, if you're Georgia, you have got to be You got to be undefeated at the end of the season. So, Michigan, although there are the issues going on right now, they're in Ann Arbor. I think they look at. I think that's kind of hindered them, but also again, it's the body of work. They really haven't played anybody like Ohio State has had to play so far this season. So that's why they're at number 3. And plus, I think most people, I think what the committee's looking at is who do we like at the moment, who do we think is going to beat who? And they're going, okay. Ohio State, we think Ohio State's going to beat Michigan. We think Georgia would beat Michigan. That's the only 2 teams we see in the country that we think can beat Michigan. Because I think that's how they're viewing this. Because a lot of times when you look at the first CFP rankings, it's how do we think these teams stack up against each other? And so I think that's where Ohio State, they think, okay, Ohio State right now will beat anybody that they play. Georgia, if they would beat everybody except Ohio State, Michigan, and so on. That's the way I think they view this. Florida State at number 4. I think that their win against LSU week 1, it's a good win. Other than that, I don't know if they've really got the incredible win because we thought, well, okay, let me rephrase that. I think Clemson's a big win too, if you think about it, because when they played, it was a big game. And remember, I had it here on the channel. It was a big game because I think that was the big hurdle for Florida State is that they had to get past Clemson. And they did. So that was the big hurdle for Florida State. And so I think now, I mean, if we're looking at it right now, the win doesn't look like much. But if we're all being honest, when the 2 teams played, that was a big game. And that was a big win for Florida State. So let's not take that win away from Florida State. Now, what we're saying here with them being number 4 and having 3 teams ahead of them, they basically have, I mean, they'll be in the playoff, but they don't have a chance against these other 3 teams. So that's what we're looking at. So that is the college football playoff rankings. And now we look at my rankings. And here is your 1 through 13 for me. You've got Ohio State, Georgia, Michigan, Florida State. So I agree. Top four is going to stay the same. With however the college football playoff says, I'm going to stick with that ranking and go from there as far as the top 4. Now, 5 through 25, like I said, I disagree. And that's where I can disagree. So, Oklahoma, Texas, Washington, Alabama, Oregon, Ole Miss, Penn State, Louisville, UCLA. So we've kind of already talked about why Ohio State, Georgia, Michigan, and Florida State is in the top 4. So if you look at Oklahoma, why do I have them at 5 and why I've only dropped them 3 places after the loss to Kansas? Well, here's the thing. The loss to Kansas, I think Kansas is a quality team. Plus, you played at Kansas. So, I mean, I'm not going to really say Oklahoma's terrible because, let's be honest, Oklahoma is a good team. Let's look at the circumstances of the game because you had a long weather delay, which does not – when you have a long weather delay and the players are sitting there in the locker room, I think that you cannot sit there and criticize a team because you don't know how the team is actually going to show up after a long time sitting in the locker room. So I'm not going to say Oklahoma's terrible. I think they're the 5th best team in college football right now. And that's another reason with Texas being at 6, I didn't move them because let's be honest, Oklahoma beat Texas. They got the same record. Both teams are good teams. I think Oklahoma gets the edge here. Head-to-head, I think, is a big thing here. It's like when you're looking at the 7-1 teams, 8-0, head-to-head is going to be big. And so Oklahoma being ahead of Texas, it's solely because of head-to-head. And then you look at Washington at 8-0 being at number 7. I just need to see more from Washington to really make me think that they are like in my top 5, or even if they get moved into the top 4. If they get moved to the top 4, I have to move them as well. That's the way that it's going to be. And so I will say this. You got a big game against USC on the road at USC. I think Washington can get this win because I think USC's not an incredible team this season. I think they've proven to ourselves, proven to everyone, that they don't have a defense. And that hurts a team like USC. So it will be interesting to see how Washington, USC, how that game goes. And then you got Alabama at number 8. Again, the reason why they're behind Oklahoma and Texas is solely because of head-to-head. Because, I mean, Oklahoma's going to be ahead of Texas because of head-to-head. Texas will be ahead of Alabama because of head-to-head. So that's how we're looking at this. Now, Oregon being behind of Alabama, I think, if we're all being honest with ourselves, Oregon is a really good football team. I just want to see them play against someone like a I want to see them go up against some powerhouse in the SEC. I'm just being honest. I just want to see it. Right now, this is where I've got it with the top 9. And then Ole Miss at number 10. They're a good football team. You're not going to see Alabama being jumped by Ole Miss because Alabama did beat Ole Miss. So, I mean, let's be honest with that. Penn State at number 11. They just have a lot to work with, I think. And then you got Louisville at 12. This has been an incredible season if you're Louisville. I mean, first year with your new head coach. And I just feel like Louisville is on the right track here. They're 7-1. You don't know what could happen with Louisville, but I mean, they are clearly right now one of the best teams in college football. UCLA at 13. I've just been very impressed with them. And so we're going to see how this ends up for them. And then we go to 14 through 25. I've got LSU, Missouri, Tulane, James Madison, Notre Dame, Oregon State, North Carolina, Tennessee, Utah, USC, Kansas, Air Force. And so that's my rankings as I see it. For LSU, big thing. If they were to beat Alabama, they will jump up pretty high, I believe. But, of course, it's going to be in Tuscaloosa. It's going to be interesting to see how that game goes. The Missouri game at Georgia, big game for them as well. We're going to see how they do. So that is just my top 25 for me. Like I said, top 4 is going to be the same as the CFP. So you don't have to worry about me, trying to compete with the CFP for who I think the top 4 teams is. Because I think ultimately, when you look at this college football playoff, they always get it right. So, all right. Let's now get into our recapping. So let me explain why let's just talk about Oklahoma, Kansas real quick. And so we look at the stats of the game. And I think, it's going to be interesting to see how this ends up. But these two teams were pretty much even in this game. I mean, let's be honest, they were even. First downs, Kansas 25-19. Third down efficiency, Oklahoma 2 of 10, Kansas 4 of 14. Fourth down efficiency, Oklahoma 1 of 2, Kansas 2 of 3. And then total yards, Kansas 443 to 440 of Oklahoma. Passing yards, Kansas 218 to 171 of Oklahoma. Rushing game, Oklahoma 269 to 225 of Kansas. The penalties, here's a little bit of the disparity in this game. Oklahoma 11 for 101 yards, And then Kansas 5 for 55. Turnovers, both teams turned the ball over 3 times in the game. And then time of possession. Kansas won this 31 minutes, 6 seconds to 28 minutes and 54 seconds for Oklahoma. So, I mean, this is a game that, like I said, you had the weather delay, so it pushed the whole game back. I think, and if you were watching this game, this was a back and forth game. And Oklahoma, there at the end, had a legitimate chance to win this game. And Dylan Gabriel, of course, he went to throw the ball just a little too far for his receiver. And so ended up being incomplete. Of course, I would have thought it would have been I think it would have been intercepted, if I'm correct. I have to go back and see that play again. But here's the thing. Oklahoma was a play away from winning this game. This is, and again, like I said earlier, that I think when you factor in that there's a long weather delay, I think anything can happen because ultimately I think anything can happen in college football. Any team can lose on any given day. But the difference here is that it even ramps even farther up when you have a weather delay, because you got 2 scenarios that could happen. The team that's not supposed to win could end up winning, and then you have no defense in the game, which you kind of had that in this game where there's not a lot of defense. Or you could have a team come out there, like the better team just come out there and just smoke the other team because the other team didn't really, the delay hurt them. And so you get a shutout in the game. So that is just my assessment. I think Oklahoma had a chance. They just weren't able to capitalize when they needed to. And I'm not going to hold this loss for Oklahoma and say, okay, they definitely have no shot. Because let's be honest. As long as they have that win over Texas, and if they were to, let's say, both teams are 11-1, and then they were to beat Texas again in the Big 12 championship, a 12-1 Oklahoma, if we're all being honest, could potentially make their way to the college football playoff. Because we cannot hold you can't say Oklahoma is worse than Texas when they go head-to-head twice and Oklahoma beats them twice. Now, it's a totally different story if Texas were to win the Big 12 championship over Oklahoma and then everything flips, okay, and we're like, okay, they split through the season. Texas, we're going to give them the benefit of the doubt. They're 12-1. Oklahoma's 11-2. So I will say this, though. That's the only scenario. I think it's the only scenario if you were to get to the Big 12 championship and for Oklahoma if they were to lose to Texas, where this game, losing to Kansas, really hurts you. Because if we're all being honest here, there is the possibility of, if you have Oklahoma go undefeated throughout the whole regular season and then get the Big 12 championship game, Texas were to beat them, I still think there's a possibility that both Oklahoma and Texas could potentially get to the playoff if the committee believes that both teams, they're 2 of the best teams in the country. So what you would have there would be a situation where you would have Texas at 3 and Oklahoma at 4. That's what you would see. So I don't want to rule Oklahoma out yet. We still have a lot of season left to be played. So we're in November. This is, when you're a college football fan, this is when you start thinking, okay, this is the time where we see the best football. Teams are fighting to get to that college football playoff. And you know what? This is the best part of the season right here, is November. That's my opinion. Because, in my opinion, Labor Day weekend is probably the best weekend of week of football, because you've got games spanning from Thursday all the way to Monday for college football. But then when you really look at it, the whole month of November is stacked with good football games. November is incredible, folks. You don't want to really say anything bad about November. October's right behind November. It's just that those weeks in between Labor Day and the beginning of October that I feel like is kind of like, not quite as good, but it's still really good football. So when we go back and look at this Oklahoma-Kansas game, we don't need to hold Oklahoma. Like, we can't say Oklahoma's terrible, because you know what? Kansas, let's give them credit. I think Kansas is a good football team as well. So that is what I have to say about Oklahoma and Kansas. Now, of course, a lot of things could change over the course of the next few weeks here through November, because it always does. Top 4 we got right now most likely won't be the same when it comes the beginning of December and we're looking at who's going to be in the playoffs. So let's now turn our attention to Clemson and NC State, because we all want to know, what is wrong with the Clemson Tigers? Well, folks, it's going to be interesting, because you know what? Here's the thing. Clemson's 4-4. What is wrong with the Clemson Tigers? Okay. And I mentioned this earlier. Here's the thing. Clemson, Kate Klubnik just is not the guy. I'm just being honest with you. Or how about this also? Will Shipley got hurt during the game, who is their star running back. Basically, haven't had much of a run game this season. Also, just the passing game's just not there for Clemson. So, when we look, okay, here's what is crazy, folks, okay? When we look at the first down disparity right here, Clemson, 20 first downs. It's not bad. That's pretty good. NC State had 9 first downs. Now you're looking at that and being like, okay, how in the world did Clemson lose this football game? Well, let's get into this. Third down efficiency, Clemson 7-18, NC State 3-13. Clemson 1 of 2 on fourth down conversions. NC State never had to go for it. Total yards, folks. When I say Clemson just finds a way to lose this season, they find ways to lose. Total yards, Clemson 364, NC State 202. Passing yards, Clemson 263, NC State 138. Run game, Clemson 101 yards, 64 for NC State. Penalties, 4 for 45 for Clemson. NC State, 2 for 6. But here is what hurt Clemson throughout the day. Kate Klubnik threw 2 interceptions throughout the ball game. No turnovers for NC State. So here's the thing. What happens if Kate Klubnik does not throw interceptions on those 2 plays? Potentially 14 points. Potentially 31-24 Clemson wins the game on the road. And instead of being an abysmal 4-4, you're not great, but you're 5-3. Better than 4-4. But the reliance on the passing game. They threw the ball 51 times. They had 30 running attempts. So they ran 81 offensive plays, folks. Had to get me some water. But that's the thing is like for Clemson, this is just uncharacteristically bad. And I mean, NC State threw the ball 20 times, ran the ball 26 times. So you're looking at 81 plays for Clemson to 46, and you still lose the game. You had the ball 33 minutes, 41 seconds to 26 minutes and 19 seconds on NC State. It's kind of sad. So, all right. Right now is your opportunity because I'm going to shift gears, and this is your opportunity. If you have any questions, then please let them put them in the chat. I will answer them as soon as I get them. So, I did have one from a few minutes ago that I do want to mention because this one right here by Chris Naylor says, who gets in? So referring to the college football playoff. To be honest, this is kind of a hard one because I don't know if there's really, I don't know how to say this, but if it were me, okay, here we go. So here's a good question here. Who gets in? 12-1 Oklahoma or 12-1 Alabama? Okay. Well, it would have to do with the body of work, I would think. Like, let's look at records. Let's compare teams by records as far as how's their season. Let's look at the wins they had. Let's look at their losses. Let's look at Oklahoma's, wins and losses. And I think when it's all said and done, that Oklahoma, here's the thing. I think if you have 2 wins against a good Texas team or 1 win against Georgia in the SEC championship game, I think probably Oklahoma. Probably Oklahoma would get in ahead of Alabama. If we're saying that, you have 3 undefeated teams and then you need 1 team to go in, either Oklahoma or Alabama, it'd probably be Oklahoma because I think beating Texas twice and Alabama only beating Georgia once, I think would probably override it. Plus, I think Oklahoma's had a better season to this point. So, we'll see. Okay. So, Chris Naylor says, James Madison is getting no respect. I kind of agree with you. Okay. The one thing I think the reason why James Madison is not really getting respect is because, if we're all being honest, it's because the NCAA has this really stupid rule about you have to be in the NCAA for so many years before you can actually partake in some kind of bowl game or even have a chance at the playoff. I mean, let me just say that by doing that, I think that's crappy by the NCAA that they're not allowing James Madison, who is 8-0. And it's not just like this season, they just now started getting good. Last season was their first year in the NCAA, and they were good enough to go to the bowl game. That's the thing that fires me up a lot, is because James Madison, this is their second straight year of doing this, where they're really good. The NCAA is stupid for allowing like not allowing these teams to be able to participate in a bowl game, because I think they would have a better shot of beating some of these teams than, I mean, they're better than some of these teams that are going to be able to make a bowl game. If we're all being honest here, James Madison deserves a lot more respect than what they have been given. And it's honestly, it's really sad to see that this is happening. And this is why college football, you got the college football playoff committee. Let them control college football, and the NCAA needs to get out of there. That's just my opinion. Okay. We got a really, I honestly do think when you think of Alabama, Clemson fans, this is very controversial. Let's be honest. This is a very controversial kind of question here. And that is, who's going to retire first, Dabo or Saban? And this is really a tough question, because let's look at both of them. Because Dabo, right now, his kind of coaching is going by the wayside a little bit, because whether he wants to admit it or not, that the transfer portal is something that's going to be here to stay within college athletics. Players are going to get paid. So I think the thing Dabo really, has got to understand is that you can't just rely on your ability to go recruit these players and then have them 4 or 5 years possibly and build them into incredible players like you were able to in the past. So I think the thing here is that that's what we're weighing for Dabo. Is he going to have enough? Is he just going to give up after the season, just be like, you know what, I'm done. I'm leaving college football. I do not want to be in this world where we've turned it into okay, let's be honest. You know how the NBA, it has the G League, which is the developmental league that they have. Or like how in professional football, you got these spring leagues, which are just basically developmental leagues. That is what college football is turning into, is more of just a developmental league for the inevitable NFL draft that they want to get to. So I think that's what you're weighing here when you look at the way college football is being structured today. Saban, on the other hand, I think it's just a matter of, his health. If he can, which he stayed he stayed really healthy to this point. I think it just depends on if he were to get, because to be honest, I think he's one of those guys, he will coach until he is just physically unable to. So, with that being said, who do I think would retire first? I gotta say Dabo. And like I said, it's because I think he's gonna have enough. Besides, also, if you have seen some of the stuff that's come out recently on the radio show he does, basically, I think it's one of those the university radio team. They do their shows with the head coach of the football team. Just getting some information about what's going on within the team. Dabo went off on a fan, and this is different. So I just have this belief that Dabo would be first, because, like I said, Saban's coach until he's physically unable to. That's just being honest with ourselves. So that is a really good question, and I think we could. Definitely, if you had a couple people on a video, this could be an hour-long debate. So, Oh, this is true. This is true right here. Auburn fans are hoping Saban is first. Well, duh. I mean, if you're an Auburn fan, you've hated the success Saban has had. Plus, I mean, besides the Gus Malzahn years, which, let's be honest, Auburn fans, Gus Malzahn may be someone you probably going to, I mean, let's be honest. If you would have kept Malzahn, who knows? You could have probably beat Alabama a couple more times than what you have. Just saying. Just saying. Just saying. Hugh Freeze could potentially do it. But how many coaches have done what Malzahn did against Alabama? I mean, that's the only thing I'm going to say to you Auburn folks, okay? So, pretty much, other than when Malzahn was a head coach, I think Saban has pretty much, has owned you. Other than if you look at those wins Gus had against Alabama. So, yeah. And so, Derek Sanford says, we want Gus. Wow. Yeah, kind of sad. Either way. All right. So, real quickly, what we're going to do the rest of the night, let's talk about Oregon. Oregon. I mean, Oregon just annihilated a Utah team which maybe has come down to earth a little bit. And the reason why I say that is because if we're being honest with ourselves, I think when we look at the way teams perform, I think Utah has definitely overperformed for the season because you just have this like long list of guys that are just unavailable. And I mean, especially like Cam Rising and Brent Keithy, not available for the entire season. It showed. As I'm going to get some stats pulled up real quick for this game. And so it'll give us an idea of how, and I'm going to be honest. After Saturday, the way Bo Nix played against Utah, and not many players have been able to go to Utah and do what he did. He is definitely near the top of that Heisman race. So we look at the first downs, actually kind of even. Oregon 18 to Utah 13. Third down efficiency, both teams converted 5 times. Oregon only had 10 third downs to have to go against, and then Utah 15. Utah went 1 of 3 on fourth down. Oregon never had to go for it. Total yards, Oregon 390, Utah 241. Passing yards 248 for Oregon, 142 for Utah. Rushing yards, Oregon 142, Utah 99. Penalties, Oregon 8 for 58, Utah 3 for 25. Turnovers, Oregon fumbled once. Utah threw 2 interceptions. Time of possession, though, Utah 31-57 to 28-03 of Oregon. So, really just an incredible game. Bo Nix. Now, Bo Nix. I mean, let me just pull this up for you. How about we give you a 24 for 31 on the road at Utah in a cold weather game, which Bo Nix showed up and played pretty good football. 248 yards, 8 yards of an average, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. Plus, to add in, he had 4 carries for 8 yards, which he scored a touchdown. So, Bo Nix played a great game. He played a great game. And Oregon could find themselves in a position where they potentially can get to the playoff here. They just need to have a rematch against Washington in the Pac-12 championship, or have Washington lose 2 games. So that is just my assessment of Oregon, Utah. Just Oregon dominated that game. And so, of course, tonight we ran a little over as far as our topics. So we didn't get a chance to talk about Ohio State, Wisconsin. So we'll be able to talk more. We did a pretty good show then because let's be honest, if you have segments if you have a segment that you had to cut because of time, you did pretty good then. So I did want to announce my Week 10 game broadcast because, Week 10, I got a great one coming up. Oh, baby. This is going to be a barn burner. This game is going to decide the SEC West, I believe. So, without a doubt, you probably know which game it is. But 6:45 Saturday night, LSU and Alabama. Oh, it's going to be beautiful to see this game, folks. Alabama defense against Jaden Daniels and that LSU offense. What is going to give in this game? That's the question. So, I mean, I'm really interested to see. I think the big question here is how does because I don't think LSU's got the best defense in the world. So can Alabama execute good offense in this game? That's going to be big. Both teams are coming off bye weeks. Of course, Alabama's last game being against Tennessee, where they were down 20-7 at halftime, came back 134-20. LSU's last game was a 62-0 win at home against Army. So, this is just a game that I think the majority of the country is going to look at and be like, you know what? This is going to determine the SEC West. Let's tune in. Let us tune in. So, it's going to be a great game Saturday. So, all right. So, I'm going to look at some more of your questions before I got to run, because we have a lot of stuff going on. Going back to our conversation about just about who has owned Saban in some of these games. Bob Stoops, yeah, I agree. Bob Stoops did do pretty good. Yeah, I'm forgetting about Ole Miss because, yeah, Hugh Freeze, yeah, he coached Ole Miss and won 2 years in a row. Not many teams, if I can remember. I don't think, other than Ole Miss, while Saban's been head coach, I don't think anybody's really beat Alabama 2 years in a row like that. I mean, you can put it in the chat. Tell me if I'm wrong, but I don't think anybody's done what Ole Miss did against Alabama those years. So, I'm going to give you a minute, let you, if you find that. I'm talking about winning the SEC West. Yeah, that's true. Ole Miss could win it, but I don't see it happening. But, so that is all I've got for today. Of course, also want to thank the people who's listening on podcast form. So, of course, glad to have them listening. And, of course, we are going to be coming back Saturday, SB and College Football Saturdays. Going to be awesome. So, you are not going to want to miss Saturday coverage here. And then at 6:45, you got Alabama and you got LSU. Beautiful game coming up Saturday night, and we'll be here for it. But for now, I'm Cooper Naylor. Thanks for watching. We will see you again later. Goodbye, everybody.